Hey there, Dr. Rock here, and welcome back to the Health Feast. These days, everyone has health advice. Experts, influencers, even strangers online. And it's really hard to know who to trust or what actually helps. That's why today I'm talking to Dr. Colin Zhu. Colin isn't just a physician. He's a trained chef who helps people rediscover health through joy, flavor, and the choices that we make every day. In our conversation, we talk about daily choices, what real health looks like, and how to build a life that you actually want to wake up to. So let's do the show.
Dr. Colin Zhu, the chef doc, in person here at the Health Feast. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Rock. Always a pleasure to connect with you again. And thank you for having me. Can't wait to, get into what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into it too. There's so many things that resonate about your message that I really want to dig into. One thing you've said before that really has stuck with me, you've said, if you want health, you have to demand and advocate for it. And that feels especially true right now. But I wanted to start with you just describing, what does that look like in practice?
So in practice, from a physician's point of view, thank you for having me. For your audience who don't know me, I'm trained in family medicine. My specialization is lifestyle culinary medicine. And a lot of the work that I do is a lot of education, and is really a lot of education, counseling, coaching of my patients to bring a higher level of awareness so they can make empowered choices. And so it's a very interesting question because, when I say, if you want health, you really have to demand and advocate for that. And I'll give you a little bit of context of why I say that is because we live and work and operate in a system where things are just blanketing and just covering up for symptoms. It's symptom suppression. It's using medications, it's using procedures, and it's not really addressing the root cause. The system, unfortunately, is not really set up for us to get to the root of the issue. It's not set up for getting to the heart of the problem. And so when you have a system like that, from the patient's point of view, a lot of times we are just making a certain issue just longer, right? And from a physician point of view, you're just kind of maintaining. That's why it's called disease management. Right? We're not actually curing. We're not actually healing. We're not actually like, okay, Mr. Smith, I took care of that and hopefully you don't come back, right? So it's not really that. So when I say, if you want health, you got to demand and advocate for that. And what I mean by that is, nowadays patients are very disgruntled. They're very disenchanted. Physicians are also jaded. We go through a lot of burnout. I'm sure you have a lot of guests on your show talk about burnout a lot. So on both ends, you see this issue where both parties are not satisfied. So you kind of have to demand and advocate for that, meaning that you want to have as much high level quality care as much as possible. And what that looks like for me, for my patients, is really about getting to the root cause and how do we set up systems and processes in place where things are sustainable. Because, when I do lifestyle medicine, which we'll talk about, it's the long game. It's not a sprint, it's the marathon. So you need to have a good foundation to the house or else it can't weather the storm.
Yeah, that totally resonates with me. I often say, the healthcare system is not coming to save you. In fact, they're waiting for you to need this management. That's what our system, because you said all these things, it wasn't designed to get at the root cause. What is it? It's designed to maximize throughput and revenue, unfortunately.
Yeah. Let's call it as it is. It's to maximize profits and to, help out the shareholders because it's a healthcare corporate machine. So
now the physicians involved, they have very good intentions, all of them. I know. I mean, my wife works she works at the VA, which I guess is not the same. But that, right, we have this giant socialized medical system in the United States that's like wholly, at least up until recently, was wholly renowned and protected. Anyway, there's a lot of ironies in our healthcare system, but that is to say, it is designed, for the most part, the fee-for-service medical system is designed to maximize revenue and throughput, because both are, the more patients you see, the more revenue that you generate. And that is not, what we're learning is the best interest for people and their health. I'm curious, what has helped you come to that realization yourself?
I think I have to go back to the beginning from my mother, because she's a traditional Chinese medical doctor. I didn't come from a long line of MDs. And so my world growing up has always been very holistic, looking at the person and a whole person approach, very preventative, because traditional Chinese medicine is 2,000 year plus system, kind of like Ayurvedic medicine. So it's really, you can't separate things, kind of like how we have specialties and subspecialties. You can't, separate the kidneys from the heart and vice versa. We don't have specialists for that. You basically go to one person, a healer, a practitioner that evaluates the entire system. To answer your question, that's one aspect. The second aspect is, I'm a doctor of osteopathic medicine, or DO. And so what that means is that in our basic tenets of osteopathic medicine and principles and philosophies, we believe that mind, body, and spirit are interconnected. We believe that structure and function are interrelated. So that enhanced and reinforced my, overall holistic approach. And on top of that, after medical school, I went to culinary school. I got certified in health coaching. And so that kind of added more layers in terms of, that foundation of the house, making sure that, everything, you're learning skill sets, you're learning, good knowledge bases, you're learning about, basics essentially. Right. And then when I got board certified in lifestyle medicine, it's the 6 pillars of health, right? Food, physical activity, avoiding risky substances. It's now called social connectedness, stress management, restorative sleep. So many layers over my career has always been, reinforcing the foundation of myself. So I can be the best role model for my patients to say like, hey, I walk the talk, I practice what I preach, and here is what I know. Right. And the science is sound, the evidence is sound. And so it's really about getting to the root of the issue. And over my, 10-year career thus far, because I work as a locum tenens, I'm a traveling physician. I've been, because I've also worked in the VA, I've worked in Indian health, I worked in community centers, I worked with underserved Latino communities, I worked with refugees. So I've been blessed to kind of look at different populations and looked at different healthcare systems and say that, the system is very broken in so many different aspects. So what can I do as an individual physician, having the lens and experiences of looking at so many different things, and how do I help the person in front of me, right? Because the system is kind of like, using a cooking analogy, too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So there's so many barriers, there's so many obstacles from between the physician and the patient, you know what I'm saying? So I operate in a way where I kind of close that gap. And so the patient can get 100% high quality care.
Yeah, I hear that. Last year you did this incredible music video that I really loved it. Can I just say? And actually, I was watching it before our interview today, and I watched it like several times. The lyrics really resonate. So I will play a little bit right here.
It's the way I live. Every step that I take is the healthiest. I got everything I need and it's all within. It's my lifestyle, now forget the medicine. We living healthy, feeling great, I wanna dance. Living healthy, check my plate, I'm eating clean. Living healthy,
It's called We Living Healthy, and it's joyful, it's creative.
Yeah.
And I honestly think it's kind of brilliant. I tell you, it resonates so much with the ethos of this show, because this show is called The Health Feast, because that we say good health should feel indulgent, like a feast. It should feel communal, and it should feel abundant and joyous. And that's exactly what the message is in that video, is that this is a way of being that feels so good. It feels amazing. Why would I want to live any other way?
Yeah, I mean, I thank you for saying that, and that was so the artist that wrote it.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about how did that come to be?
Yeah, so it's an artist's name, Energy Steve. That's his stage name, and I just met him. We crossed paths. He comes from the lifestyle world. And he's based in Santa Monica, and we just said, hey, let's, I have this idea for a song, and this is my idea for this music video. And I was like, okay, let's partake in it. Nothing like, full production, nothing like anything like that. It was a very, spontaneous thing. And he's a one-man show. He produced the beats, he wrote the lyrics, everything is produced by himself. I just kind of just stood in and, just kind of, did whatever I could. But and I agree with you. It's really meant, being healthy, having well-being. And I talk a lot nowadays is really emphasizing the power of we, because, whenever I give lectures or whenever I'm on another show or platform, I talk about these two words, illness and wellness. And what's similar and dissimilar about them is that with illness, there's the word I, right? And in wellness, there's the word we. And so I make that comparison because a lot of times whenever we're sick, we're not feeling well, we face things alone, right? And in America, it's a very interesting country because, during this current political climate is that, we are the United States of America, but in a lot of ways we're very individual, and we're very individualistic, and we're very siloed sometimes. And so with illness, making a analogy with illness is that, we face problems alone. And in wellness, there's the word we. And the reason why I highlight that is because there's a lot of power and a lot of healing when we can strive for health together. There's a lot of power in community, right? If you look at the blue zones, highest concentration of people living over 100, what they all have is each other. One of the common denominators amongst them is community, is really having a close sense with very, even small circles. It doesn't even have to be big circles, it's small circles. So what I'm trying to say is that it's supposed to feel, human beings are social beings, and we're supposed to do things together. And I think that's what we're missing nowadays in the digital age with the internet, social media, and now in the, era of artificial intelligence, is that we are technically more connected, but we're also technically way more disconnected. So.
Yeah, it's cool, like, for example, that we can have this conversation. And so I think the medium does allow for deep connection. And to your point, like, much of it is not being used for that. Much of it is being used to buffer. I think that's how, like, most people are using technology or their phones or devices in their life. And it almost detracts from... But now I understand the we. Thank you for explaining that. The why we is so important. It's not I'm living this healthy lifestyle. We living this healthy lifestyle. And that gives it even more of a sort of rich context. So I really loved that. I know you're saying you're sort of just like kind of a side character in that. You were doing all these different healthy behaviors and stuff, but it was really fun to see you in there and to be a part of that. So I loved it when it first came out, and then it was nice to revisit it and watch it, and we'll share that with our audience because it's catchy too. Like it's in my head. So
for sure, because the core root of everything positive that we want to promote is really behavior change. So, if a music video does the trick for you, then why not? So
replacing medications for meditation is one of my favorite lines. Anyway, I know you're working on a new project, Empowered Kitchen. And so I'd love to learn more about it. I know it's a cookbook in the works. It's a collaborative effort. I believe featuring over 25 experts, physicians, chefs, dietitians, farmers, environmentalists. So can you share a little bit more about this project and kind of what it aims to accomplish?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. So the book is called Empowered Kitchen, and it's a collaborative cookbook. And I'm writing this with not over 20, about 35 actually.
Oh, wow.
So like you said, it's with plant-forward physicians, chefs, dietitians, coaches, farmers, and environmental experts. And the reason why I called upon so many different experts and colleagues is because the goal of the book is to connect 3 aims, 3 points. It's really about how do our food choices impact our health, and how does that subsequently impact our community, and how does that subsequently impact our planet. And the reason why I got into culinary school, going back to the beginning of the interview, is because yes, nutrition is very interesting, but what was more interesting to me was why was there a huge disconnect and gap between, where does food come from and how does it arrive to your plate? And over the span of my career, through all the different iterations that I delivered education and teaching about this subject, is there's so many gaps. There's so many points of disconnect. And then I also looked at, cookbooks. Cookbooks nowadays, back in the day, it used to be very functional, very practical, mother's recipe, grandmother's recipes, things like that. With Food Network and with the entertainment value of it, of cooking shows and competition shows, and, things just being more sensationalized.
Yeah.
I see that cookbooks are just something flashy nowadays. So I wanted, bearing this in mind, I wanted to write a cookbook where, of our times, because each of those points, health, community, and planet, we're facing a crisis. And, believe it or not, they're all interconnected. And so the point of the book is, how do I help the reader connect these points, because they all matter? Using an example of the pandemic, which we all went through, I think the positive benefit from going through a pandemic is understanding that what we say, don't say, what we do, don't do, affects someone else. And so that happens exactly with food, right? So the food choices, what you decide to put put into your mouth, not just affects your individual ecosystem within your body, but it also affects the ecosystem around you, your loved ones, your family, your friends. It determines, it's basic economics. It determines, the farmer, the meat packer, the produce vegetable farmer, of how much someone wants, right? So that, that interplays with that. Right. And then that, and how much of our food choices impacts, how much resources, we consume, water, land, right? And then climate change, greenhouse emissions. We're facing a crisis in each of those points. So I wanted to create a cookbook to marry all those things together, but also put content, educational content, that is a call to action to say to the readers, like, okay, it's not just about food. What else can I do? So that's the point of it.
That's amazing. And it sounds like that slated to be released next year, 2026. Is that
yes.
right? Okay. So we're going to look forward to having you come back when that gets released, so we can. But I want to dig into then those like elements that you talked about, personal health, community health, and our planetary health. And you said the solution is all interconnected. Maybe you can expand on that. Like for personal health, what is it, specifically that people might be thinking about that, and how does it tie into those other factors?
To those other ones, yeah. So if you look at the top 10 causes of death, more than half of them, heart disease, cancer being the top 2 every single year. In fact, if you combine heart disease and stroke, deaths together, they claim about, upwards of like 900,000 Americans every single year.
Really?
And so when you look at it, more than half of the top 10 causes of death are very, highly interlinked with diet and lifestyle choices. And so, a lot of, our healthcare economy, right? Our GDP, about 20% of our gross domestic product is spent on healthcare, right? And so 90% of those healthcare expenditures is on mental health and chronic disease management. The latest stats is like $4.9 trillion, right? And believe it or not, that actually exceeds the total economy of Japan, right? And interestingly enough, if you look at the stats, and this is just 2022 stats, if you look at the stats, in terms of outcomes, health outcomes, this was reported in the Financial Times. In 2022, our life expectancy was around 76, 77, right? And Japan, which has, much higher, they clock in around 84 years life expectancy. But guess what? They spend 60% less than we do, and they are able to achieve, a much higher life expectancy. So using that, it tells you that we're kind of not using our resources well.
Yeah, it's not the money they're spending on, because, it's a misnomer, right? That you said we're spending so much money on healthcare, but we're really not. That money's not going towards health. It's going towards disease management, right? It's going towards disease management, which doesn't create health. It propagates suffering.
Correct. It goes back to what we were saying in the beginning of the interview is we're not really addressing the root causes. So everything that I've done up into my, for my career of thus far is really about addressing the root cause. And so that's the aim of the cookbook is, how do I highlight these points, right? So to expand it out a little bit, if we're looking at concentric circles, is that for the community, we have a lot of issues with social economic, disparities, health disparities. There's a lot that has to do with systemic racism, in terms of like food access, in terms of, how far someone has to travel to get high quality food. That all interplays with one another, right? Systems have been in place, for that to happen, right? We live in a time where most of the food that we eat is, either highly processed, ultra processed foods, or it's coming from animal-based sources. And so, it tells you that, things are strategically placed that, not only do you not have a high chance or high access to good food, but, high quality food is really scarce. And then when you're, expanding that, even more is that, okay, we're eating in this way, but what does that do to the planet? So, we'll talk about climate change in terms of land use, water use. Like, for example, to produce a pound of beef, right, it takes around 1,800 gallons of water just to produce 1 pound of beef. Whereas, a pound of lentils is around just 43 gallons. To put that in perspective, 1,800 gallons is kind of like, if you turn on your faucet, you hear the faucet, you're like, okay, the faucet's running accidentally, I'm just going to turn it off. Imagine that faucet in your household being turned on for over 20 hours. That's the equivalent of how much water is consumed, just to produce 1 pound of beef, right? Land use, the standard American diet, which is, mostly animal-based and ultra-processed food, that's a standard American diet. To sustain one person, on a standard American diet, to put this in perspective, land use, you need the equivalent of 3 football fields, to be able to sustain one person, on, the standard American diet. So even if you don't talk about nutrition, right, from an ecological standpoint and a resource standpoint,
I was curious how that compares, that 3 football field analogy. How does that 3 football field analogy compare to someone who, say, was on a whole food plant-based diet? Like, how much land space would their diet require?
I don't have the specific, it's much less. It's probably it's a fraction of that. I don't have it offhand for you, but they did comparisons of like tofu. They did comparisons of just growing beans, lentils, for example. The amount of land use will be significantly lower. I'll give you a different example. Upwards of like 20% of our Amazonian rainforest is deforested, and majority of that is actually used for animal agriculture. Why? Because you need that much land to have cows graze. You need that much land just to produce the actual food, just to feed the animals, which contributes very, very little in terms of calories for us to consume. So it's a very disproportionate mismanagement of resources, for the human species. And there's only so much land, right? There's only so much land that we have, on planet Earth. And so, if you look at the ocean, we overfish. And what I mean by that is that we are taking more seafood from the ocean than the ocean is able to replenish. So what that means is that from an ecological standpoint, a lot of experts, say that by 2048, a lot of fisheries will collapse. Never mind, the damage we've done with plastic and all that stuff. God. I cite these examples just to give your listener an idea that, the human footprint is very vast. It's very vast. It's very multifactorial, meaning like, there's so many touch points that the human species does. And it's not just about food, but our overall lifestyle choices as well. And so the goal of the book is to also highlight this.
Yeah, as well. It's all interconnected. I get that. But you're pointing it out in a way that maybe I don't really think about on a regular basis. You before this interview, you pointed out to me that by 2050 we will have to feed 10 billion people. And so what have you learned about kind of the link between daily choices and bigger global outcomes?
Yeah. So, United Nations are estimating that by 2050, the human population will be upwards close to 10 billion. So the question is that, having the context of the resources that I just cited, how do we healthfully and sustainably feed that many people by 2050? Right? Because resources are very limited, right? And so, there was a whole commission that was put together called the Eat Lancet Commission. This was back in like 2019. And it's a team of over 30, I think it was about 40 scientists, world experts to kind of answer this question. So you have, climate scientists, and then you also have experts from like nutrition to public health and all that. And so they, I encourage your listeners to look this up, but the 2019 Eat Lancet report basically said that, if we shift more towards a, plant predominant, not saying vegan, but majority plant-based, we can sustainably, go for that. Because what they found in their reports, looking at so many different types of meta-analyses, is that, we're able to prevent 11 million deaths globally, premature, global deaths, if we're able to decrease, how much red meat consumption, if we're able to increase more beans, legumes, nuts, and seeds, if we can decrease our consumption of dairy and saturated fats, specifically from animal sources, things like that. And so, they're trying to find like a good sweet spot where, we can both, as a human species, healthfully move forward, but also protecting the natural resources. Because, we're in that direction right now where, we're heading into like a red zone.
Yeah.
A lot of climate scientists are saying that we're heading into a red zone. in terms of how we're consuming.
So then what do you say to the carnivore diet, which, is the exact like opposite of like the way you and I eat? Like it's like 100% opposite. They don't eat anything we eat, and we don't eat anything they eat.
I mean, like that it's
a very popular.
another,
It's gaining popularity, Colin. It's gaining popularity. It's like
it's gaining popularity. But popularity is not the equivalent of, I mean, we're in a time, interestingly enough, we're in a time where fact and evidence and science don't really make any difference, to people, right? It's really whatever is sensationalized, whatever, people has like the biggest, like, bark, whatever people has the most highly confidence in terms of espousing, right? It's not really grounded. We face an age where, we're in an era of misinformation. So much so where, probably you and I, a third of our time is really debunking things. Really, it's really helping the patient, debunk things. Because, I mean, how many times, for you, a patient comes up to you and says like, oh, I Googled this, or nowadays you're asking, AI, which I think AI, can actually do a better job because it's actually, it's able to reason, artificially it's able to reason. But, a lot of times they go to their Google search, and social media doesn't help because it's based off of an algorithm which feeds. So the more clicks you click on something, it's going to give you more of that. So meaning that it reinforces a confirmation bias. So if you believe that, eating predominantly like, eating a lot of meat is good for you, social media is going to feed you that more, like both literally and figuratively, right? But it's not based on, hard science, right? I mean, there's good science with keto, right? Keto, like for example, was really meant to help with epilepsy in kids. That was the original, aim of ketogenic diets, for example. But paleo, carnivore, it's just, you have to think about it this way. Like, we're not living in those times. Resources are very disproportionate now. And I would also encourage that, we are not carnivores, because if you look at our teeth and our digestive tract, we're not, we're meant, over time to have developed to eat more plants because that was more abundant than actually, eating, meat per se. If you look at animals, right, the largest animals on planet, they're mostly herbivores. Carnivores are smaller animals, right? So, you don't ask a horse like what kind of protein are they getting? If you get kicked by a horse, you're done. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to ask them where you're going to get your protein. So, because they're not going to say meat.
Yeah. My favorite is grass-fed. Not my favorite to eat, but just the concept of grass-fed beef is like really like, oh, the cow is eating grass. Like all the nutrition is coming from grass.
You're eating middleman. Yeah. You're eating middlemen, right? What does the cow, chicken, and pig eat? They eat plants. They don't eat meat. So the protein is from plants.
I don't know who described it this way recently. I heard meat is a processed food. It's basically like the animal is processing it. So you're taking like, it's just like the factory is taking like all these plant ingredients and turning it into some concoction. The animal is taking all these plant ingredients and turning it into like a vehicle for saturated fat and protein.
There's so many things to talk about this, because it's like not just the animal, you have to think about slaughterhouses. You have to think about CAFOs, which are called concentrated animal feeding operations, and where they're physically located. If you look at locations of CAFOs, they are strategically placed in marginalized communities. And guess what? Those marginalized communities, which are, predominantly people of color, they get the side effects of, fecal waste in the air that they breathe, fecal waste in the lawn, in, the property that they live on, right? So you have to go beyond the plate. This is the reason why we talk about this. You have to go beyond the plate and ask, how does it affect someone else, right? That's the whole point of, connecting these dots, you know what I'm saying? So, and I mean, I don't know about you, Rock. I've never diagnosed a protein deficiency, but guess what? We face a fiber deficiency in this country. 97% of Americans
100%.
face a fiber deficiency in this country. I've never diagnosed a protein deficiency. The average American eats twice as much more protein that they actually need. But guess what? Your liver is going to be affected. Your kidneys are going to be affected. So many things are going to be affected.
Totally.
So, have at it with your
Totally.
protein. The better question is, how is your protein packaged?
Yeah. And what's it coming with? Is it coming with things that are worsening your health and causing cancer and raising your cholesterol, or the things that actually do the opposite? Yeah. That's great. Let's take this to like more practical every day though. So there's most people, they say they know what to do. I think you're right. We are living in this post-truth world for so many things, and nutrition and health is one of those now. Like, well, you don't have to look very far to see examples of that. So what do you do? How do you work with people practically? They've heard what they should be doing, but there's this huge gap between knowing and doing. So, I'm curious, what's your approach?
Yeah. So a lot of times, when I'm working with a patient, we're all faced with a constraints of time. So over time, I had to really hone in my education for someone. So I don't have a lot of time to say. So what I would do is that I'll have a patient in front of me. We'll talk about your family history, so where you came from. And then we'll have biomarkers on the screen. So, so basically we say, hey, Mr. Smith, your grandmother, your father, mother, sister, they face XYZ chronic disease, right? And then your biomarkers, it looks like, your cholesterol is a little bit up, your blood pressure is a little bit up, your waist circumference has a couple more inches, et cetera, et cetera. So basically you set up the picture of, this is where you came from and this is where you're going. Or this is, where you're already at, right? And so, you can't really dispute that, right? So from there, it's, you have two choices. It's really, do you make food choices and lifestyle choices, which only can go in two directions. It either feeds, enhances health or feeds disease, right? There's no in between. That's what, whatever you do is going to do one of two things. So you have to make the choice of, this is the fork in your road, right? Do you want to continue to enhance your health, or do you want to feed disease? And I tell them up, it's kind of like, building wealth and, relationships, partnership and marriage. It's the long game. Okay. Health is a long game. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So what that means is that in order for you to see, you have to think about it like building wealth. In order to see return on investment, it's the long game. It is boring, very, very boring, but you'll reap the benefits on the longer game. Why? Because you and I both know that, the short game will end up, the cost is your health, right? So if you want to do fast food, if you want to do, all these, biohacking and all this stuff and not really addressing the root cause, guess what? You may be saving money, but if you're not investing in your health, the cost is an ER visit, an ICU visit, right? If you look at COVID deaths, right? What are the risk factors? If you look at all the deaths on, the COVID, what do they have in common? Most of them have chronic disease risk factors, lifestyle related risk factors. If you're hypertensive, you're obese, if you have, respiratory disease, if you have chronic kidney disease, et cetera, et cetera. So, the common denominator is you're not addressing the root cause. So addressing the root cause is investing in your health. So you want to put in the money now, right? Before, paying way more in the form of an ER, ICU, a surgery, right? Having, part of your, digestive tract, resected from colon cancer, right? So it's, I paint that, for them, right? And I tell people that chronic disease really has just four roots of causes: chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, lack of fiber, and dysbiosis, right? It's really one of these four or a combination of these four. So where does that come from? That comes from when you're eating predominantly animals, when you're eating ultra processed foods, when you're not mitigating or minimizing or reducing the amount of toxins that put into your system, or you're being exposed. You're not stopping smoking. You're continuing to drink alcohol, and all the pillars of lifestyle. So I go through that gamut within like 7 minutes, because, you just hone it every single time. And most of the time the patient can't really dispute me, you know what I'm saying? Because it just makes so much sense for them. If their family history, I tell them like, yeah, 20% of genetics counts for it. But guess what? As you know, Dean Ornish tells us that, genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle, pulls the trigger, right? So you explain epigenetics to them, right? So your choices determines whether on and off, right? If they want to give me that genetic game, right? If they want to tell me that genetic excuse, right? They don't want to, meaning nothing they can do when you can do something. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, you're empowering people, right? And you're using food as power. There's so much fear and confusion around food today. And that comes from, like, I think diet culture and shame and restriction. But one thing your work reframes food as something joyful, empowering, creative. And so I love that. And how do you help people see food in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I break down everything. So the work that I do with lifestyle and culinary medicine is I go deeper in terms of helping the patient understand what is it, their relationship with food. Because food is multi-layer. Food is emotional. Food, it is an expression of love. Food is cultural. Food is economic. Food is political. So, but we can't live without food. You can live without smoking. You can live without alcohol, but you can't live without food. So it's a decision that we make 3 times a day, 3+ times a day, every single day. So, but I tell the patient, like, every single time you have to make a decision, you are putting, your health, in an investment firm where you're reaping benefits, or you're putting it into a bucket, where you're about to kick, anytime soon. So which of these pathways do you want to go? And so I tell them that, real food is very simple. Real food is what Mother Nature intended it to be. So it's not grown out of the ground, off of a vine, or out of, off of a tree. Then man has messed with it in some way. Right? So basically, in a supermarket, we break down the anatomy of a supermarket. Where I want you to spend majority of your time is in the produce section. Okay. Gut experts tell us that we need 30 to 40 grams of fiber. What does that look like? Up to 30 vegetables. I tell them to eat the rainbow, not Skittles, right? So as many colors as possible, as many various diverse plants as possible, because you want that diversity, you want, that variation, you know what I'm saying? Spend most of your time in the produce section. Real food is perishable. Real food doesn't have a nutrition label. Real food will eventually die, right? And, and it's alive, right? Spend minimal amount of time in the shelves, right? Which is processed, which has ingredients that your grandmother can't pronounce, which has a long list of ingredients that, it's mostly concocted in a lab, right? Which majority, of supermarkets have to stock because they're incentivized, because they're a business as well. They were incentivized to put crap food, on their shelves because, the food and beverage companies are $1 billion company.
Yeah.
The reason why they're $1 billion company is because they have repeat customers, right? They can't make money from you eating produce. So it's a money game. You got to follow the money.
I follow your recommendations for myself. Well, one thing actually I find helpful, and I've been telling my patients, if they have the ability, and these days the fees are pretty low, like to order groceries online. And actually sometimes it can help people access foods that they otherwise wouldn't have in their immediate community. And it also takes out the temptation of because when you walk into the store, you see a tower of Oreos, greeting you. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
so, but I hear you. I try to spend most of my time in the produce section. I will say that you have to kind of venture in to get like the canned beans and whole wheat pasta and like canned tomatoes. And so like, but it's like a minefield when you walk in there.
It really
they put all
is.
these things in front of you to like tempt you. You're like, this isn't where Fruity Pebbles.
It's very strategic. Like, for example, if you look at it, the gallon of milk is placed on the opposite end of the supermarket. Okay. Why? Because they know that you have to traverse the supermarket, right? It's like a maze, it's like a rat maze for you to get to the milk, right? So along the way, you're just picking up crap along the way, right? Which, by the way, crap stands for calorically rich in process, okay? Which comes from one of Dr. Greger's colleagues. So my point is that, the supermarket, like you said, it's a minefield. You have to be very strategic. I would recommend do not go into the supermarket hungry. Have a list, have a list of recipes, and be very strategic. You know what I'm saying? So, and it's the same thing with your TV, be very strategic with what you consume, visually. Because on the TV, well, nowadays it's a little bit different because a lot of things are streaming. But like a lot of things on the TV, majority of the commercials are what? Pharmaceutical ads.
Right.
Right. So, it's kind of like, that's a minefield too. You know what I'm saying? And so now you're like poised to go to your doctor and be like, hey, is this medication for me? Right. And so it's so multifaceted. It's so multi-layered, and everyone is stood to like make a buck from it, right? Because we live in a sick care, nation where people make money from people being sick. No one makes money when you're healthy, right? So people are incentivized if you continue to be sick. If I was big pharma, if I was, big meat, if I was big ag, right? I would be the exact same thing if I was money incentivized, but I'm not. You know what I'm saying? I care more about people getting well.
Yeah.
I'm not incentivized, by pure profits, but these companies are. So if you think about it from that perspective, this is the reason why I say connect the dots. If you can follow the money and understand from that perspective, then your entire way of looking and navigating through health becomes simpler. So,
I'm sure you were at the ACLM conference a couple of years ago. I know you were. But Dr. Sammy Begg received the President's Award. And did you recall his speech? Were you there for that? I don't know if you remember, but he said that.
Yeah, Sam is a good friend of mine. So,
Okay, yeah. So he said in his speech, I don't know if you remember this, and so many people were like moved by it, including me, that lifestyle medicine has one pillar, and that pillar is compassion. And so much of what you're saying about both individual health and how people make choices that are in alignment with their health and their values, and then the planet and the environment. And like you said, there's no profit in good health. It is that underlying through line that, inherent in this is a system of care that is based around compassion. And I feel that from you, man. I really do.
Yeah. And I appreciate you. Thank you. Number one, I appreciate that. And I want to add to that point where, we all signed up because of compassion. We signed up for a profession of service, right? Honestly, who loses out from all this is the patient and the physician. The patient, where they don't get the resources and education to heal. The physician, where they don't have good satisfaction and job fulfillment. This is the reason why we burn out, right? And have moral injury. And everyone else in between, the cooks in the kitchen, are profiting from, right? And, I'll do you even better, like Dr. Greger's work, right? He, everything goes to a nonprofit, right? For animals, right? And I'll do you even better. I make no money from this cookbook, right? So the money we're raising right now is for the book production. Once the book is written and we work with a publisher, once it's published, okay, all the proceeds goes towards nonprofits. So I'm funneling all the proceeds to help with reforesting, trees, both on land and also in the ocean, because the best way to sequester carbon from our atmosphere is by planting more trees and by helping the ocean. And we have a plastic issue. So now part of that proceeds will go towards nonprofits that its main focus is to clean up the plastic and trash from our oceans as well.
So I'm going to ask this question then. Like, there's all this reason to be, I guess, pessimistic. Like, from what you're describing, the immensity of the disaster that we're living in and facing, and then you look at sort of the political climate and what's happening around us, and one would say, well, maybe we can get out of this, but we actually there has to be a will and an effort put forth by humanity to do that. And largely, I think we're not seeing that in the way that maybe needs to be seen. Or what are you thinking? What gives you hope?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. It comes back to the power of we. It comes back to really, really understanding your morals and values, right? And I think no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, we want all of us to thrive. I think it's a creation. Like, I don't want to go too deep into this, but racism is a human creation. You know what I'm saying? Borders is a human creation. If you go out in space looking at Earth, you don't see lines that divide us, right? So, and we're only one race, the human species, right? I mean, we have the common denominator of living on the same planet. There's no planet B right now, right? So it's kind of like we all have a global, what I call our global citizen stewardship. Okay, we all have a stewardship to fulfill, because we interconnectedly affect someone else. We have a duty to do better by each other, right? It comes back to community. It comes back to the power of we. It's come back to, even now, I'm not writing this book by myself. I'm writing it with 34 others. Right? It's the power of we. I know that I can't do this by myself. So to answer your question is, hope is really something that you cultivate, right? I think you need to have hope and you need to have faith, right? And I think to me, they're very two different things. You need to have the beliefs that it will be okay, right? And, I would say, find that support, rally each other up. You know what I'm saying? That's why I said, going back to the beginning of the podcast, if you want health, you got to demand for it. You got to advocate for it. Not just in terms of the political sense, but also in terms of the physician, in terms of demanding it for yourself, right? It starts with you. Your choices starts with your ecosystem, which affects your community ecosystem, which affects the planetary ecosystems. They're all connected.
Yeah. Wow. I feel just so empowered hearing you say that. And I think that's a wonderful message for all our listeners that do deal. I think a lot of people deal with frustration in the current system, and they're just they don't know what they don't know. Like, they're kind of being pushed through this system that tells them only one side of the story. So it's important for people to feel empowered and to know that there are other things they can do that hopefully don't even involve the healthcare system. Yeah.
It really is. I mean, if I can empower you to not depend on me, then that means I did a job well done. That's the reason for the title of the book, right? It's really, you and I will never be out of a job, right? Because there's enough sick people in the world. I think what would probably happen faster is AI will probably replace us, but that's a, different topic for a different day. But, I would love to be put out of work if I can empower people to really take care of themselves, right? So that's really the goal. You know, I think that if people are healthier of mind, body, spirit, then we shift away from a survival, from a scarcity mindset to a thriving mindset.
Yeah.
So that's the message that I want people to take away from.
Okay, Colin, I ask everyone one final question when they come on the Health Feast, which is, you are coming to our proverbial Health Feast, and Dr. Zhu is bringing a life philosophy or a mindset tip that you personally live by. And so what are you bringing to the Health Feast?
I would probably say practice every day with just focusing on one thing, okay? And focusing on one thing that you're grateful for. Because you can't be in a negative mindset, for example, a resentful mindset, an angry mindset, and be grateful at the same time. It's almost impossible, you know? So if you can, you know, energy, what I've learned, someone wiser than me, said this, is energy, energy goes wherever the mind flows, right? So if you focus mostly on just being negative, then your reality will manifest that, right? And so, it's really, if you just focus on one thing, just focus on what you're grateful for today, whether it's your friends, your family, your spouse, your children, right? I still have a job. I still have money in the bank, whatever it is, right? My car is still working, my dog still likes me, like whatever it is, what I'm saying? Like, focus on being grateful, one thing at a time. So I know, we live in a very precarious time, but one foot, I'm a runner. So, one of the best signs that I saw is left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. And that basically means that, just take it one step at a time.
Oh, I love that. That's wonderful. I can tell that's how you probably live your life, and then the ethos and message that you send to all your patients and all the people who follow you. Yeah, wonderful. Well, Colin, if people want to connect with you or learn more about this project or the other things that you're doing, what's the best way?
Yeah, honestly, the two places, my main website is thechefdoc.co, or you can find me on social media, is thechefdoc. I'll put a link with you guys for the book if you want to contribute to help fund this book, because we can't do it without you guys, to be honest with you. We need your support for this book to go out there. But it's called The Empowered Kitchen, and you'll have all the information there. And, check out, some of the co-authors. They're just a fabulous bunch, and I'm very humbled to write it with them. There's no book that I know of that is out there like this. And so it's really, our hearts collectively combined, is really, we just want this planet to heal. And so we can't do that, without the individual journey. And the hope is that that individual journey becomes a we journey.
Beautiful. That's beautiful, friend. Thank you so much for coming here, for bringing your presence and your energy. I just feel this wave of kindness and kind of joy for living from you, and that resonates. Yeah, no, really, that resonates from you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
I really appreciate that too, and I appreciate being able to have you on today. So we do our requisite fist bump to the camera.
Oh,
okay,
nice.
Boom. All right, boom. All right, and thank you all for listening. Please like us, subscribe, give us a 5 out of 5 review. That's how you can support the podcast. And until next time, live well and rock on, everybody.